To get into this, first, we want to dig into what is it that we mean by a team. And so early on in the development of Shortcut, we realized that it was insufficient to focus just on feature teams or just on the software engineering members of an organization, but rather we needed to have a space where everyone in the organization involved in building out the product and understanding customer problems and developing solutions had access to what work is in progress, what work is on deck and coming up next, which of our customers' problems are we focused on as an organization. And so a Shortcut Workspace is an open forum of information. Any member of a Shortcut Workspace can see any of the stories in it. And then Shortcut provides this dual set of tools. On the one hand, it provides tools to bring focus on specific initiatives and for specific teams in your company. And then it provides tools for sharing up and out. So on the focus side, we have things like grouping stories into epics. And then if you want to sequence your work in sprints, we have iterations. And then we have teams that can be assigned ownership across all those things. And that brings focus again to specific parts of the work and for specific people. Then to move into the sharing up and out, those same epics can then be put on the single canonical shared by the whole workspace roadmap, where you have an ordering of epics by team to understand both what has been done in the recent past, what's in flight, and what's up next. Part of the virtue of having such an open space and an open forum is that each of the functional groups in your company is able to come to the table with their unique perspective on what is the most important problem for our customers to be solving right now. So getting away from high level talk and down into a concrete example, as an engineering manager, part of the unique perspective I have on work that's important to everyone who uses Shortcut are the tools that as an engineer I'm using on a daily basis. So this would be things like dashboards showing performance metrics. This would be logs that show errors from the application, both on the client and on the server side. This would be bug reports that come into us from our customer service team and from the community Slack channel that we keep, and from internal bug reports. So part of what we do as an engineering team is try to balance the amount of time and effort and focus that we spend on planned work for new features and enhancements to the product, as well as attending in a reasonable manner to the emergent issues, performance regressions, and bugs that come up. One of the main tools that we use to help us manage our own bug service level objective, our SLO, is the stories page. And we have custom spaces that we've configured for this purpose. So you're looking on my screen right now at a custom space designed to show just bug stories created in the last month that are in one of our incomplete workflow states, so they haven't been finished. And lastly, that none of those stories fall into an iteration. So for us as a team and a set of product development teams, we've agreed that if we're going to take on a bug, we're going to put it into an iteration. So if it's in an iteration, it's going to get worked on in the near future. And if it's not, it's still fair game. For lots of reasons, sometimes bugs can't be knocked out in that same initial period of time, whether they're hard to reproduce or whether they are part of a known issue that has a fix that is larger than a single story. So we use a second custom space, which I'm now showing on my screen, which complements that first space. So the first space kept the field of vision just on the last month of bug stories. This expands the field of vision out to 3 months. So we see a created any of last 3 months, but then it excludes any made in the last month, giving us that set difference of don't give me the last months, but give me 2 and 3 months out. And here we have another way to model work in our system. So here we're not just sticking to unstarted work. We're looking at workflow states of both backlog, unstarted, and in progress in case a bug was started and had a really difficult root cause to suss out or a difficult fix and it's still in progress for a long period of time. And likewise, we recognize in this view here, we see epic, any of no epic, meaning this shows stories that haven't been assigned to an epic. That is, bugs haven't been assigned to a larger root cause and aren't being worked on in that way. So this gives us a way to keep work from falling through the cracks. And this helps us complement the roadmapped work, the planned work with important emergent work over time. So now that as an engineering manager, I have my team's work kind of sorted out, work queues relatively full, what does it look like to focus on my team and its execution? So we said that part of Shortcut's philosophy is that we're working as an entire organization And so, on the one hand, it's really not possible to think about delivering value just as individuals. There's no one on the team that can simply take an idea, code it up, and ship it without having other folks reviewing it at every step of the way. But it can be helpful for those folks who, for example, do run stand-ups, and for the day-to-day kind of granular management when you have folks out sick or you have a production incident that pulls someone away from their planned work for a period of time. We have in Shortcut per team a status page here that shows a breakdown of work by person and all the stories they have in the workflow states for your workflow. But really what we want to do is in terms of planning out work, in terms of thinking about the team's execution, we want to go to a slightly higher level and think about how is work flowing through my team as a system, as an organism. And so for that, we're going to go not by teammate, not on an individual level, but think about flow of work through the team. So how can we visualize whether work is flowing smoothly through the team? This is one tool that Shortcut provides. This is a cumulative flow diagram. We have this on the iteration page and on the standalone reports page. And this shows the accumulation of work in different workflow states over a period of time. So this period of time here is a 2-week long iteration. And if we look at the bands, the green bands represent completed work, the blue bands represent in progress work, and the yellowish bands represent work that hasn't been started. We might notice that in the center of this graph, we see this spot where there's a ballooning of work in a particular workflow state. But at this moment in time, at the end of Monday, during that iteration, there were 13 stories that were in a ready-to-review state, meaning there was a PR on GitHub ready for peer review, and they hadn't been reviewed yet. So the question here is, what do I do with this information? On the one hand, the very first thing you should do is prompt good team discussion around, is this a behavior of our team as a system that we like? Do we want work piling up in this way? But we need more than just one visualization to kind of help us manage the flow of work through a system. And so for that reason, we are going to think a little bit more systematically about it. How can we deliberately and in a structured fashion improve the flow of work through our teams? Well, one approach is to measure work in progress. And by measuring work in progress and having explicit limits on that work in progress, we can use that information to identify bottlenecks in our own process. And then once we've identified those bottlenecks, we can then as a team decide how we plan to adapt to the presence of those bottlenecks and what are we going to do to improve them to help the work that we have on our plates flow smoothly through the team. On the right-hand side of my screen, you'll see a screenshot of our early release of configuring WIP limits for a specific team for a specific workflow. So we have some WIP limits set there on the right for 4 of the workflow states. This is specific to a team and a workflow so that, as Jordan and Kurt mentioned, for teams that want to work in a slightly different fashion and don't want to use WIP limits, they can opt to work in their own fashion, but teams that want to adopt WIP limits can do so using these settings. So what does this look like when I'm doing work as a team? Here's an example of a board that shows these WIP limits in action. And so we see that the ready for review column, much like in that cumulative flow diagram, that CFD that we saw, we've exceeded what we said as a team we could take on for stories and ready for review. And the solution here might be one of many solutions, right? The value that Shortcut provides at this moment is this feedback to the team that a conversation needs to be had. The circumstances here could be there's a really sensitive PR that the person to review is absent, they're sick, and we really need that person to check this PR, and we're not going to force it through, we're not going to rubber stamp it. So maybe we're okay with a WIP limit violation for a single day or two. Maybe this means that actually our review cycles for this team that we're on requires much more process around PR review than another team might. And so actually a single ready for review workflow state might be insufficient to model the reality of our team. And maybe the action the team wants to take on is to split ready for review into 2 or 3 separate steps, each with their own WIP limits. And at that point, work flowing through the system, you might still have a bottleneck. One of those sub steps might be the problem slowing work down, but then you now have a tool to identify, oh, this is actually the more granular workflow state that we need to work on as a team. So one of the things you're not going to have to do in terms of breaking your workflow states into pieces is modeling things that Shortcut automates on your behalf. So I just want to highlight one piece here that, for example, in this particular case, having PRs and ready for review, yes, you need to review work or pair or whatever your team does to help make sure that work going out the door has been checked. But once you have made a story in Shortcut and associated that story with a branch that you then publish to GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, we have tools in the product to help you pick the right branch name and associate your story automatically. Once that's in place, you can configure multiple different phases of the GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket lifecycle to move stories through your Shortcut workflows. And so in this case, once this PR is merged, it might move a story on this particular team into the completed state. So hopefully that's not a workflow state you need to add to your team to click buttons in the UI. Right. Finally, to wrap up, once the team has been working for periods of time or we've reached the end of an epic, we need that place again to go from what is my specific team doing to how does my team's work fit into the larger priorities and goals of the organization. And so we have this shared roadmap where all those stories that are in epics are coming back here to be discussed and ordered and to have different kinds of status added to them to keep the rest of the org up to date on how we execute as a team. Thank you.